Now, there's an MBE in the King's Birthday Honours list for the man who organised the vigil which followed last summer's horrific stabbings in Southport. Revd Martin Abrams is Spiritual Care and Chaplaincy Manager at Southport Hospital and receives his award for services to the community in his hometown. Well, he's been given his reaction to the award to our reporter, Mark Geyer. Have a listen to this.
It makes me feel both very proud and very humbled, and also a little bit bemused as well. I just feel every day when I go to work, I'm privileged to do what I do, and I do my job. So although I feel very honoured and proud, I also feel, why me? But it's a great honour, and I'm very, very privileged.
Now, you've worked at the hospital for 13 years, and you have this title, Spiritual Care and Chaplaincy Manager. So what does that mean?
Wow, it means anything you want it to mean. Traditional chaplaincy, of course, was religious practitioners going to religious patients, but today spiritual care is about anybody who's any sort of spiritual distress or spiritual need. So we will support the religious needs of people in a traditional way. Anybody who's got any sort of psychological or spiritual distress, we can support and we can help, we can spend time with. And so we spend a lot of our time with people who wouldn't necessarily say they belong to any particular faith tradition, but find illness and hospital environments challenging, and we're there for them to offer support and care.
So you must be speaking to or helping people, their relatives and friends. Maybe they're in their lowest ebb, very distressed, questioning life, questioning everything, and you've got to be almost a rock for them. You've got to be extremely strong, because you must, over the years, have seen some very sad situations there.
Of course. Yes, most days we'll be called to somebody who is recognised as being poorly enough to die, and the relatives are with them, and we'll offer support to the person who's approaching the end of life and those who are important to them. And of course, that comes in lots of very different contexts. It sometimes comes as almost a natural friend. If somebody's life is coming to a natural end, there's still, of course, sadness and distress. And other times it's dramatic and out of the blue and incredibly tragic and just incredibly shocking for people. And in those contexts, it's very difficult to know what to do second to second and how to put one foot in front of the other sometimes.
And you do come from Southport, so it's not the biggest place. So there must be many occasions where you know people, or you might know someone who knows that person, maybe just one step removed. So you probably have a good idea of the people you're helping.
That's very, very true. I spent the first 19 years of my life in Southport. I went to a local primary school and secondary modern school as it was back then. I left Southport in 1983 and then came back in 1997. I was minister at Ainsdale Methodist Church, superintendent of the Methodist circuit for 15 years, and then took up this role within the NHS. But yes, you're absolutely right. I know lots of people in Southport, depending where you draw the boundaries. I think it's about 100,000 people in Southport, and I know them, and I know a lot of them. I support the football club and spend a lot of time in the community.
Well, sometimes, obviously, are you too close to people, or you know the family, or you have to step back a bit? Does that have to happen sometimes?
Yes, that can happen when you got a friendship. You got to watch the boundaries. You're not crossing the boundaries. Fortunately, I work as part of a very supportive team, and we'll recognise it in our staff meetings and our debriefing when we're crossing boundaries, and when it'd be appropriate to take a step back and let somebody else take a step forward. And then you can be a friend to somebody rather than a professional support person, a professional spiritual carer.
So, as somebody who has grown up in the town, you're very fond of it. That obviously the events of last summer with the murders of those 3 little girls, you took it upon yourself to organise that vigil, and the days that followed, they must have taken a lot out of you.
As it did anybody in Southport. What happened that day was just absolutely tragic, and even as we're approaching the first anniversary next month, I don't think many of us have really processed what happened. Southport, I remember saying at the vigil, a relatively sleepy seaside town, and suddenly we're known in the same breath as Dunblane or Hungerford and Southport, where there's been some terrible tragedy. tragedy, and it touched everybody. Obviously, the families of the three girls, but, many more as well, those who were injured, those who saw horrific things. But of course, it is about the three girls, and who were quite rightly recognised at the Pride of Sefton Awards some weeks ago as sort of being the absolute heroes of Sefton.
And we like to think that there's more good in the world than bad. There were terrible events following the vigil, but we saw the best of Southport, the way the town, the community responded the next day by tidying up a lot of the mess, offering to help to rebuild parts of the mosque. So do you think that showed Southport in an even better light?
I think, nobody would ever want tragedy to bring out the good in any situation. But I think the true Southport was the absolute respectful silence at the vigil. And after the terrible, terrible riots, Southport coming together, rebuilding communities, the mosque, and a work that's still going on now. And the fantastic things that the parents are doing, as it was announced in the last couple of days about the gardens outside the Atkinson, the town hall, being a permanent dedication and memorial to the three wonderful girls, is just fantastic for any Southport resident.
Reverend Martin Robbins, the spiritual care and chaplaincy manager at Southport Hospital, talking to our reporter Mark Gay.